Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Thomas and Friends Character Showcase. It's been a while, but I'm happy to be back. And today we're going to be talking about some of the most hated characters in the Thomas franchise. Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. Also, as a side note, I would like to apologize for the audio quality. My normal spot is unavailable to record right now, so yeah, sorry about that. So, let's start with the tank engine twins themselves, Bash and Dash. According to the Wikipedia, they're based on Bear Harbor Lumber Company's locomotives, known as gypsies. There were about 20 of them built in total, and to this day, only one of them currently is still in working operation. So let's start there. They're built in California at the Bear Harbor Lumber Company. The two are finished on the exact same day, making them twins, and they begin work on their little line. But due to their naturally wacky and relatively destructive nature, they're bored by normal work. And I imagine they would actually get along with the trucks really well. Like Scruffy would love these guys just for the pure chaos that they can bring when they really feel like it. But to go on a tangent here, I feel like I should talk about their personalities before we get into their overall story. Sorry, none of this is scripted. So, from the episodes that I've seen of them, despite the fact Misty Island would lead you to believe that they're just complete and utter psychopaths, their individual episodes actually show that each logging loco has a distinct personality, which we'll get to Ferdinand when we get to him. But Bash and Dash, when you look at them, there is quite a difference between them. From their standout episode, Bash definitely has the most clear personality. He seems to be the most emotional out of the trio, since when he's separated from his brother and Ferdinand, he's actually rather depressed. It's interesting to see these normally chaotic characters show some legitimate emotion. The episode still isn't great. I mean, Toby is, well, he isn't really Toby in the episode, but that's just Sharon Miller era in a nutshell. But I liked Bash in it. I thought that was actually kind of cool, showing that he legitimately does care about his fellow logging locos. Dash, on the other hand, although he definitely cares as well, what's the best way to put this? I see it as, if Bash is the emotional one, Dash is the Boy Scout, in the way that he's like down in the dirt, so he knows how to work with his hands kind of thing. Like, for one, he's mastered how to use his whistle, but, I mean, someone had to know how to run things on Misty Island. So I kind of like to think that Dash is the default leader of the group. This is going to be a weird comparison, but I think his personality is probably somewhere between the chaotic nature of a troublesome truck and the confidence of Thomas, where he's very much just like, oh, okay, I can handle this situation, no problem. Although, unlike someone like Thomas, who would actually show that he's clever, at least clever enough to get out of trouble, I feel like Dash would just be like, okay, I have a problem, throw a truck full of logs at it. I mean, that's pretty much their answer to a lot of issues, honestly. So, the pair have been brothers and had a very strong bond, but they have a very chaotic nature of doing things. I imagine that they get their jobs done, but at a terrible price. Like, they probably have a horrible safety record. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they've even nearly injured a couple workmen at one point or another. Like, maybe they're record holders at loading logs, but it's because they strap all the logs to old Wheezy. They're just like, let it rip! And the trucks just get hurled logs at them and nearly take out a couple workers. But to their credit, they are successful most of the time, but, like, the people running the railway just do not want to deal with them anymore and are considering just scrapping them. Which, I think this is where I should bring in Ferdinand. So, we're going to move over to, in my opinion, the least bad of the logging locos, and talk about his story briefly. Now, Ferdinand is honestly my favorite of the logging locos. Like, he just has a pretty cool design, and I think there's a lot of potential with him. So, here's my idea. Ferdinand, according to the wiki, is a Climax Class C logging locomotive, which normally I'd go into where these kind of engines were built, but the thing is, it's kind of irrelevant, since if you look into these kind of engines, they're kind of just all over the place. Quite frankly, they're really useful engines. They're very practical. They're not fast, sure, but they're really good at what they're made for, hauling logs. So I could easily see that Ferdinand, by some series of events, ended up in California on a similar area as Bash and Dash. Now, according to the Wikipedia, it describes Ferdinand as, and I quote, a fun-loving logging loco who lives on Misty Island with Bash and Dash. Which I feel this is quite accurate. However, I want to take an element to Ferdinand and add that to it. So, as we all know, Ferdinand pretty much says one thing for the most part. That's right! Which, a lot of people find that really annoying. It doesn't bother me all that much, but I can definitely see it getting annoying after a while. However, I want to do something with that. Why is it that he only says, that's right? Like, why doesn't he specify things? And when you actually look at it, he very rarely speaks up for himself. He normally just responds to people with, that's right. So, here's my idea, and obviously I'm looking way too far into this, but for the sake of this kind of video, I'm doing a deep look into what you could do with these characters. What if the railway that Ferdinand came from, his manager was not a good person? Like, he would make the mid-Sodor director look like the fat controller when it comes to niceness. So, let's say maybe at one point, Ferdinand was really embracing his fun-loving, outgoing side. Like, he could be a very talkative engine. But I'd imagine the manager would see this as a waste of time. He could probably say something like, engines are to be seen and not heard, Ferdinand. Don't know why I gave him a Texas drawl, but whatever. I feel like I should give this manager a name. How about, Mr. Shakeridge. Yeah, Mr. Shakeridge. He's a very controlling man, and I could totally see something where he doesn't even want his engines referring to him by name, but they just want him referring to him by sir or boss. Like, maybe on his first day, Ferdinand is like, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Shakeridge. Ferdinand, you do not refer to me by Mr. Shakeridge. That was my father. I am your boss. Understand? That's right, boss. If you know, you know. And as time goes on, the manager gets more and more harsh with Ferdinand, criticizing even the slightest screw-up. But whenever Ferdinand goes above and beyond with his work, he doesn't get any credit for it. And I could totally see that just beginning to really destroy his social life until the point where he's only speaking if spoken to, kind of thing. Like, perhaps the manager's like, Ferdinand, I need you to take this special load of logs to the mines immediately. No idea why the mines need logs, but whatever. Now, I know you're a simple sort, but I assume even you can manage that. Am I correct? That's right, boss. And the friends Ferdinand used to have, he wouldn't even be able to talk to them anymore since he's worried the manager's going to punish him, or perhaps even send him for scrap. So, eventually one day he is taking a delivery over to the logging camp where Bash and Dash work. And at first, he's really at a low point. He's not smiling, he's hardly making a noise, only whistling when he needs to. He's just really down. Now, Bash and Dash don't realize this because I don't think they're very socially aware. They're just like, oh, it's a new engine, let's go mess with him. And they would pull like almost like a Bill and Ben Boko situation where like Ferdinand doesn't know these engines and he's not going to immediately notice the color difference. He's just going to be like, wait, what? Wait, there's two of you? But unlike someone like Boko, who is like very enraged and potentially traumatized by that event, Ferdinand, since he's been so suppressed when it comes to his fun-loving nature, he would just kind of begin laughing and almost tearing up at someone finally playing a joke and just having a good time for once. And after that, I imagine the three of them would become close friends. And not only that, but I imagine Ferdinand very easily could save Bash and Dash from potentially being sold off or being sent for scrap. Like, just to set up the scenario, let's say Ferdinand begins spending way more time at the logging camp with his friends rather than doing his own work, and the manager is just getting tired of having to deal with Ferdinand, and at this point, diesels are starting to become a thing. So he decides to try selling Ferdinand off. He's intending to give him to the scrapyard, but the logging company learns about this, and they've noticed that he's actually a pretty practical engine, so they decide to buy him for cheap. And from that point on, Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand become the logging Locos. Now, for a while, the railway finds a lot of good use for the logging Locos, but as time goes on, it becomes clear that they don't need the engines as much as they used to. And I imagine they still get up to trouble, so eventually they come to the conclusion that the engines aren't making as much money as they're costing them in having to replace rolling stock. They decide to throw off the side of a bridge for whatever reason. Which I would love to see how this version of the logging Locos react to that. Like, Dash is all for it. Like, this truck called him out and cursed at him once, so he's just like, let's throw him off the cliff. Bash is just like, I don't know if that's the right idea, but I mean, it looks like it'll be fun. And Ferdinand is just kind of like, I don't know if this is the right thing. But since at this point he's been trained to be seen and not heard, he doesn't really speak up about his opinion on the matter. And that truck is launched off the cliff. And as it falls, it just goes, and then the wagon just like collapses into several pieces. And the logging Locos are just horrified. Like, they knew that the truck would be a little dinged up, but they weren't expecting it to be in that bad of condition when it hit the bottom. So that night at the shed, the three engines have a little indignation meeting about what they should do next. And Ferdinand is like, we shouldn't have done that. What were we thinking? Oh God, we have blood on our buffers. And Dash would just say something factual like, trucks don't have blood? That's not the point, Dash. And Bash, as the emotional one, is trying to cope by trying to stay positive. It's just like, oh, look, in our engine, he's pulling the remains of the truck. They'll repair him. And then they see workmen walking with gas torches, and he's just like, well, maybe they're going to weld the pieces back onto him. And then they see them pull the remains of the truck into the scrap shed. Okay, yeah, I'm out of positivity. At this point, I imagine the twins just start arguing about whose fault it is. Like, Dash is saying things like, well, you should have talked me out of it. And Bash's retorts, well, you shouldn't have had the idea in the first place. Well, why would you even do that? Of course he's going to smash into a million pieces when he hits the bottom. Well, I didn't know that. I thought he would have been fine. Besides, the guy was a jerk anyway. He was alive! Okay, I can't even remember what he called me, but he said something rude. And as the two twins are still arguing, Ferdinand realizes that he has to be the adult in the situation. So he just blares his whistle at full blast and just says, "It's all our fault. None of us should have done that, and we can't make the same mistake again. I don't know what's going to happen to us. Maybe the directors will send us packing. Maybe they won't. The point is, we can't change what we did. All we can do is learn from it. We can't make the same mistake again. We can't let what happened to..." Wait, what was his name? I think his name was Flat Card. That's what he is. Whatever. We can't forget what happened here. We have to remember that jokes are funny, but we have to remember our actions have consequences. And then the two twins kind of look at each other and they're just like, "You know what? That's right, Ferdinand." And from that point on, the logging Locos become far more sensible engines. They still play jokes, but they're a lot more reasonable jokes. Like, they're bumping the trucks a little bit too hard every now and again, but not to the point that they're going to wreck them or anything. However, despite their better behavior, the railway begins to realize that they can't afford all these engines and they have to start cutting their losses. And the logging Locos, because of their track record, I imagine they would be pretty high on the list to get cut. However, the manager of this railway thinks that Ferdinand can still be useful and contacts a friend of his who lives in the United Kingdom. Which, this part's really up to you guys. You could say that this guy, for whatever reason, is building a railway on Misty Island, a strange island that nobody knows about, yet can be seen from Brendam Docks any day it isn't foggy. Or, here's my headcanon, Misty Island is just the nickname that the logging Locos gave the Isle of Man. It's an island right off the coast of Sodor, and it still matches real-life geographical location. And like I mentioned before, Ferdinand's class have been known to work pretty much anywhere. He would just have to be re-gauged. So he's definitely a candidate to work on that new railway. So a representative of the line comes over to California and offers to pay for Ferdinand to be both re-gauged, transferred, and bought so that he can become a part of their railway. And the representative, he offers all accommodations that Ferdinand would need, which Ferdinand only has one real accommodation, apart from obviously being re-gauged. He wants his two friends to come with him. And by doing this, he potentially saved Bash and Dash from being scrapped, which the owner of the railway kind of shrugged and thought, well, we can always use some more shunters. Which, he would probably eventually come to regret this decision, since even though they're partially reformed, the two are still Bill and Ben levels of reckless. And eventually, although the owner wants to keep them despite his disapproval with the twins' actions, the railway board eventually decides, okay, we gotta get rid of these twins, send them to the scrapyard. And I imagine, like, as soon as Ferdinand hears that they've been sentenced for scrap, Ferdinand just looks at the twins and is like, we're getting out of here. And, like, Bash is worried, but Dash is just like, yeah, let's do this. So their drivers agree to the plan going forward, and what they're wanting to do is get to the dockyard and convince a ship to take them to the one safe haven for steam engines in the world. A place they likely heard of due to how close they are, the island of Sodor. So they kind of pull an Oliver, Isabel, and Toad, where they slowly but surely begin to get closer and closer to the destination, hiding out for a couple days on end as likely a couple hunter diesels are just, looking for steam engines to scrap. But eventually they make it to the dockyard. I could totally see the twins trying to pull a world's smallest violin trick where Bash is just sobbing his eyes out and Dash is trying to talk the cranes into going along with their plan. But it's actually Ferdinand who is able to convince the dock workers to go along with them. Listen, you don't owe us anything, and if you don't want to help us, hey, that's all right. But we're trying to escape scrap, and please, if you could just take the twins here at least, that would be great. If I have to be left behind, then so be it, but please, give them a chance. And I imagine all the dock workers are just like, ugh, it'd be a shame to leave you all for scrap. Okay, we'll make room, and maybe they even attach them to, barges at the end of the ship. Like they just pull a Misty Island. And so they eventually make it to Sodor, and as we all know, the Fat Controller is very accepting of escapees from scrap. So they eventually become a part of the Northwestern Railway, and I could totally see them ending up working at logging camps. Imagine if they tried cutting down trees in Henry's Forest. They would start a freaking civil war on Sodor over lumber. Look, old square wheels, we need the wood for our engines. You stay away from my trees! Speaking of the steam team, I could totally see Gordon eventually growing some respect for Ferdinand. At first, he just looks at him as, oh, here's some weird American engine. He's such a strange design with his pistons all revealed. He doesn't even burn coal. Ugh, and are those wood chips all over him? Ugh, he's filthy. Honestly, I could totally see Gordon and Ferdinand having an interesting relationship, since when you look at the characters, polar opposites of one another. Ferdinand, he only really talks majorly when he needs to, when he really needs to say a speech to inspire others to do better. Otherwise, I imagine he just stays silent for the most part. While Gordon, he's very loud and proud about how grand he is. But I imagine over time, Gordon would at least come to silently respect how Ferdinand does things, even if he would probably never admit it. And Bash and Dash, they could just go toe-to-toe with any group of twins, Splodge, Arian, Bird, Bill, and Ben. They would just, the moment they see a pair of oh man. Bash and Dash versus Donald and Douglas. Please, someone write a story about that. Anyway, this video's gone on long enough. I think I've said my piece for the most part about the logging locos. If you guys like any of these ideas, feel free to adapt them. Anyway, this is ComFan13. Remember to have a good day.